Okay, let's go over your review for your test number 11 on factoring. Okay, number 1, I said you could skip that. So let's go ahead and move on to number 2. What is the greatest thing that will divide into a 12 and also divide into 40? And the biggest number that does that is a 4. Then I look to see if they both have m's, and they do. And what's the greatest number of m's they both have? They both have 2 m's. Then I look at their n's. Do they both have n's? Yes. What's the greatest number of n's that they both have? They both have 1. So 4m squared n would be our GCF. Okay, number 3. I'm going to go ahead and do this 2 ways, just in case you wrote it one of the 2 ways. So first I asked myself, what's the biggest thing that divides into 6, 30, and 72? And the biggest thing that goes into all of those is a 6. And then I look to see if they all have x's, and they do. And the greatest number of x's that they all have is 2. So some of you might have put that for your GCF, and some of you might have put a negative 6x squared for your GCF. Technically, if our leading coefficient is a negative, then we actually do want to pull out a negative number. So I'm going to do this both ways, just in case. With this one, I ask myself, 6x squared times what gives me this? And it would be a negative x squared. 6x squared times what gives me a negative 30x cubed? And it would be a negative 5x. And 6x squared times what would give me a negative 72x squared? And it would be a negative 12. This one would be the same inside as this one, except for all the signs would switch. This would be a positive x squared, this would be a positive 5x, and this would be a positive 12. This is really the answer we're looking for. So if you ever have your leading coefficient being a negative, we actually do want to pull that negative out. Now I'm going to go ahead and cover my GCF up, and I'm going to try to keep on going. So I look for a GCF again, and there's nothing that goes into all of those. So the next thing I'm going to do is, since it's a trinomial, 1, 2, 3, it's got 3 terms, I'm going to go ahead and do my a times c rooftop. So a times c makes 12, and I'm looking for numbers that add to be 5. So can you think of 2 numbers that multiply to be 12 that also add to be 5? And there's nothing. So this is our answer right here. And if by chance you wrote it like this, then that would be your answer too. Okay, number 4. First thing I always look for is a GCF. Nothing goes into 1 and 9 besides 1, but they do both have x's, and the greatest number of x's they both have is 1. Every time I find my GCF, I build my 1 set of parentheses behind it. X times what makes x squared? X. And x times what makes a negative 9x? A negative 9. Then I just look to see if I can do anything else. And this doesn't have a GCF, and it's not a difference of squares, because this doesn't have an even exponent, so I'm done. That's my answer. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to number 7. So first I look for a GCF, and nothing goes into 1, 16, and 48 besides 1. They don't all have x's. So next thing I do, since I have 3 terms, 1, 2, 3, is a times c rooftop. So I take my a times my c, which makes 48. So I'm looking for numbers that multiply to be 48, and I want those numbers to add to be a negative 16. So what numbers multiply to be 48 that add to be a negative 16? And it would be a negative 12 and a negative 4. Okay, because of the 1 in front, I can shortcut. So it's going to go x with a minus 12, and it's going to go x with a minus 4. And there it is. Shortcut. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go on down to 8 before I go to 5. So looking at number 8, I look for a GCF first. Is there anything that goes into 1, 5, and 1 besides 1? No. Do they all have X's? No. So there's no GCF. So next thing on my list, since there's 3 terms, 1, 2, 3, is to do A times C rooftop. So I take my A times my C, which makes -1, and I want them to add to be a +5. So what two numbers multiply to be -1 that add to be 5? The only thing that multiplies to be a -1 is a 1 and -1, and those do not add to be 5. So you can't do it. This is prime. There's no GCF. Whoops. There's no GCF. You can't find any number combinations that work, so this is prime. It is not factorable. Okay, hopping over to number 5. First I look for my GCF. Is there anything that goes into 1, 1, and 30 besides a 1? Nope. So next thing on my list, since there's 3 terms, 1, 2, 3, is to do my A times C rooftop. So A times C makes -30, and I want my numbers to add to be a +1. So what two numbers multiply to be -30 that add to be 1? 6 and -5. And then because of the 1 in front, I can shortcut. So it's going to go X with a +6, and it's going to go X with a -5. And that would be my answer. Okay, number 6. First thing I look for is a GCF. And is there anything that divides into 16, 16, and 12 evenly besides 1? Yes, there is. A 4. Do they all have R's? No. So 4 is my one and only GCF. I build my parentheses behind it. 4 times what is 16x squared? I'm sorry, 16r squared. And that would be 4r squared. 4 times what makes a -16r, a -4r. And 4 times what makes a -12, a -3. Now I'm going to cover up my GCF and I'm going to try it all over again. So looking inside my parentheses, I look to see if I have a GCF in there. I do not. And then because it's got 3 terms, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to do my A times C rooftop. So 4 times -3 makes -12. I want my numbers to add to be -4. So what two numbers multiply to be -12 that add to be a -4? And it would be a -6 and a +2. Since I do not have the 1 in front, I can't shortcut. So I have to do this one the long way. So I'm going to recopy the 4r squared. Instead of using the -4r, I'm going to use these two numbers. So I'm going to write a -6. I just follow it with an r. I'm going to write a +2. I just follow it with an r. And then I bring down the -3. So I bring down the 4r squared. I bring down the -3. Instead of using the middle guy, I use these two numbers over here followed by r's. Okay, then I start looking for the GCF out of the first two pieces. And what is the greatest thing that will go into a 4 and a 6? 2. They both have r's. The greatest number they both have is 1. Every time you find your GCF, you build your parentheses behind it. So 2r times what makes 4r squared? 2r. And 2r times what makes a -6r? A -3. Okay, then I look at my back two pieces. What's the greatest thing that goes into 2 and 3? 1. And then I know whatever is here goes here. So if that's 2r minus 3, I know this is 2r minus 3. I come back and I figure out what kind of 1 is it, and it needs to be a +1. That way +1 times 2r makes that +2r, and +1 times -3 makes that -3. And my final step, I take what's in both of these parentheses, I slap it down in one set of parentheses. I take what's left over, 2r plus 1, I slap it down in another set of parentheses, And I only have one minor detail to remember, and that's my Mr. GCF that I pulled out at the very beginning. Drop him on down, box it up. Okay, number 9. First thing I look for is a GCF, always, always. And there isn't a GCF. Next thing, since there's 2 terms, I look to see if it's a difference of squares. This is a difference because it's a minus sign. Then I look to see if those are perfect squares. And they are. So I slap down my 2 sets of parentheses, one with a plus, one with a minus. I ask myself what's the square root of 49w squared? And that would be 7w, because 7w times 7w is 49w squared. And then I ask myself what's the square root of 1? And that's 1, because 1 times 1 is 1. And there it is. Okay, number 10. First thing I'm going to look for is a GCF. Is there anything that goes into 2 and 200 evenly? Yep, a 2. I build my parentheses behind it. 2 times what makes 2y squared? And that would be y squared. 2 times what makes a negative 200? And that would be a negative 100. Okay, then I'm going to cover up my GCF and I'm going to try it all over again. So inside of here, I look to see if I have a GCF. I do not. So next thing, it's got 2 terms, 1, 2. So I look to see if it's a difference of squares. This is a difference. Are these both perfect squares? Yes, they are. So I slap down my 2 sets of parentheses, one with the plus, one with the minus. What times what makes y squared? Y. And what times what makes 100? 10. One minor detail, Mr. GCF, drop him like he's hot. All right. Are you factoring experts? I hope so. All right, the rest of this review is all review from things that we've learned earlier in the year. So I'm just going to kind of take you through this. I know you can see the answer, but I want you to know why it's the answer. And I could show you a couple of ways. So first of all, since you were given a point and a slope, then I knew that I could use point-slope form. And this is what point-slope form looks like. And then I just start plugging in what I know. Y minus the y coordinate equals slope times x minus the x coordinate. Then I distribute my negative 4. And after I distribute my negative 4, I know I need to get y by itself, so I move my positive 2 by subtracting 2 from both sides. And voila, there it is. Y equals negative 4x plus 6, which is answer choice C. Now another way you could do this is you could put these into the y equals of your calculator, go to the table and see which one has 2, negative 2 in its table. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is you could put this 2 in the x's and this negative 2 in the y's and see which one gives you a true statement. Okay, this next one. It wants to know what the range is. So when it says what is the range, it's asking what are the y's. And they tell me what the domain is, so that means those are the x's. And if those are the x's, then I'm going to put them into the x. So first thing I do is I put negative 2 into this x. Make sure you slap down your parentheses and then plug it in. A negative 2 squared is a positive 4, because negative times a negative makes a positive. And that gives me a positive 10. The next thing I did was I put the 4 in to the x, and I slapped down my parentheses and I plugged the 4 in. And when I worked that out, I got 22. And b is the only one that gave me a positive 10 and a positive 22. So I just stopped right there before I even plugged the 7 in. Okay, this next one. We learned how to solve these by hand with substitution, the bread meat bread, elimination, also by graphing. But I am going to do this right now with the matrix. It is already ready for it, so I'm going to go second matrix. I'm going to arrow over to edit. I've got 2 rows, 3 columns, so it's a 2 by 3. In front of this x I have a 1. In front of this y I have a 1. My constant is a 10. In front of this x I have a 3. In front of this y I have a negative 4. And my constant is a 9. Next thing I do is I quit this screen. So I go second quit, second mode. I go back to matrix. I arrow over to math. I go all the way down to letter B, R, R, E, F. I go back to matrix. I want the name A, so I hit enter, and I hit enter one more time. As long as there are 1s on this diagonal and 0s on this diagonal, these guys right here are my answers. The first answer goes with the first letter, and the first letter is X. The second answer goes with the second letter of the problem, and the second letter is Y. So I know my answer is 7-3, which is C. Okay, number 14. I can do this 2 ways, so I'm going to show you both ways. Number 14, it tells me the area, it tells me the width, it wants to know the length. So first of all, I know my formula is area equals length times width. So I plugged in my area, I plugged in my width. I'm trying to figure out what my length is. What times my width would give me that? So I'm going to show this to you 2 ways. First way, what could I multiply 12 with to get a 48? A 4. What could I multiply m squared with to get an m to the 5th? M to the 3rd. What could I multiply an n with to get an n squared? N. So I can see that my answer is D. Another way I could do this, if I want to solve for my width, if I want to solve for my length, then I can divide both sides by my width. So this is another way I could do it. My length would be the area divided by this width over here. 48 divided by 12 is 4. When you divide the same base, you subtract the exponents, so that would be m to the 3rd. And when you divide the same base, you subtract the exponents, and that'd be n. So either way, you get the same answer. Another way I can do it, I know area is length times width, something times something. So I could just try to go at this by factoring, but this problem doesn't factor quite like some of the others that we've been looking at so far this unit. So quite honestly, this is probably one of the easier ways to do it, but we can always go to our division method as well. Okay, flipping the page. Number 15. It asks for the slope, and it gives me 2 points. So I know anytime I'm given 2 points and I want to know the slope, this is the formula that I would use. This is the x-coordinate, this is the y-coordinate, this is the x-coordinate, that's the y-coordinate. Since this is my first ordered pair, that's x1, y1, and since this is the second ordered pair, this is x2, y2. So I follow my formula. I take y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. 2h minus h is 1h, and 3h minus 5h is a negative 2h. I know anything divided by itself is 1, so shoop, those cross out. If nothing else is left up top, you have a 1 up there, you just don't see it. So the answer is a negative 1/2. Answer choice B. Number 16. If I want to know the slope of the line, I want to put my equation in slope-intercept form. I want it to look like this. So since I want y by itself, y is what I decide to circle. I circle everything smushed with it. Whatever's outside the circle, I add or subtract. So I subtract both sides by 5x. And then the negative 4y drops, the negative 5x drops, and the positive 10 drops. And then I undo multiplication with division. So I divide both sides by negative 4. And then a negative divided by a negative makes a positive 5/4, and 10 divided by negative 4 makes a negative 5/2. Remember, slope is the number that's smushed up against the x, so the slope is the 5/4. Answer choice C. Okay, this last one. It's kind of a doozy. So I'm going to show you a couple ways. One's with the calculator to make life a little bit easier, and one is going to be by hand. So it wants to know, I don't want to show you too much, I already have some of this worked out. It wants to know what the x value is to the solution of the system. If I want to know the solution to the system, I want to see where the tables have the same ordered pairs. So if I look at my two tables, I do not see the same ordered pairs in this table as I do in this one. So I need to do a little bit more work here. So if I had the same ordered pair here as I did here, then that would be the solution and I could go from there. So I'm going to try to write an equation for each of these tables. So first I'm going to do that by hand. One way of finding your slope is finding the change in your x's, finding the change in your y's, and then remember slope is the change in the y over the change in the x. So negative 8 over 4, negative 6 over 3, negative 4 over 2, and I get my slope to be negative 2. Once I know my slope, I just need to pick a point. I can pick any point I want to pick, and then I can put my point or my information in point slope form, like I did earlier on one of the problems. So since I know my slope, I can pick any of these points. I would use the y-intercept if the y-intercept was real nice and neat on the table, but since it's not, I'm just going to pick any point that I want. I think I'll pick the 1, negative 7. So I go y minus the y-coordinate, which is negative 7. That's going to turn into a plus, equals the slope, negative 2, times x minus the x-coordinate, which is 1. If I distribute my negative 2, I get a negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 1 is a positive 2. Recopy the y plus 7. To get rid of this plus 7, I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. The y drops, the equals drops, the negative 2x drops, and 2 minus 7 makes a negative 5. So that's the equation of this first one. Then I'd still have to find the equation of the second one and go from there. Okay, another way I can find the equation is by using that stat in the calculator. We did it earlier in the year. It's just been a really long time. So I went to this button right here that says stat. I want to put data in, so I'm going to go to edit. In list 1, I put the x's. So negative 6, enter, negative 2, enter, 1, enter, 3, enter. In list 2, I put in my y's. So 7, enter, negative 1, enter, negative 7, enter, negative 11, enter. Okay, I'm going to quit out of this screen. So second mode, second quit. I'm going to go back to the stat button. I arrow over to calculate, and I know that these are lines. And since they're lines, I'm going to go to number 4, lin reg. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to hit enter one more time. And it looks like slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. They just use an a. And you can see that the slope is negative 2, which we found by hand. And you can see b, the y-intercept, is negative 5, which is exactly what we found when we did the problem by hand. So you can do it by hand, no big deal, or you can make your calculator do it. I'm going to make my calculator do all the work on this next one. So I'm going to go stat. I'm going to edit. In list 1, I'm going to put my x's, negative 3, 2, 5, negative 5. In list 2, I'm going to put my y's, negative 4, 11, 20, negative 10. I quit the screen. I go back to stat. I go to calculate. I want lin reg number 4, enter, enter. And this would be y equals 3x plus 5. Once I have my two equations, I can find the solution a variety of ways. I could graph them, see where they intersect. I could do the matrices in the calculator. They're just not quite ready for matrices. I could do substitution, the bread, meat, bread. I'm going to graph them. So I am going to go to the y equals. I'm going to type in the negative 2x minus 5. I'm also going to type in the 3x plus 5. I'm going to graph them. Wherever the two lines intersect, I know that's my answer. So this guy right down here, that's my answer. And one time, or a few times, we talked about how you do this. It's just been a while. And then I'll show you something else. It's second, trace, 5, enter, enter, enter. And you can see that the intersection is -2, -1. -2, -1. I also could go to my table, and wherever I see the same ordered pairs, that's where I know the answer is. And you can see here's -2, -1, and here's the other -2, -1. So since they both have -2, -1 as a solution, or in their table, then I know it's the solution. And this wanted to know the x value, and the x value is the -2, so -2 is the winner, winner, chicken dinner. And that's it. That's it for the review. Good luck on your test. I hope you do the best.